Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Atheist Experience. It's Sunday, June 6, 2010. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Martin Wagner. Welcome back.
Thank you.
How you been?
Busy, quite busy.
Yes.
But, yeah, good busy.
We are not going to raise any kind of crazy topic or anything at all. We're going to go almost straight to calls. I'm just going to get the announcements out of the way as quickly as possible. This is a live public access television program sponsored by the Atheist Community of Austin. For more information about the ACA, you can visit our website, www.atheist-community.org. There you'll find a frequently asked question page along with a calendar of events and information about special events like our upcoming Bat Cruise, which I'll touch on in just a minute. The ACA is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We have weekly meetings every Sunday at Romeo's on Barton Springs Road, except for the first Sunday of the month when we host our lecture series. That was this morning, where we had Doyle Duke, author of this book, The Amazing Deception, A Critical Analysis of Christianity, come and talk to us this morning and answer some questions. Had a good time. We did put that lecture on the first Sunday of every month. The second Sunday is a board meeting at Romeo's. In addition to this program or the various other events we have going, including Atheist Happy Hour every Thursday at the Dog and Duck beginning at around 7 o'clock. The ACA also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Non-Prophets. For more information about that, you can go to nonprofitsradio.com. That's P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S. And yes, it's still on hiatus. No, it's not dead. The current plan is to start producing new episodes in August. That's the plan, is to start new episodes in August, but Russell talked to me the other day. There's a chance that he and Linnea may do a special one-off episode. There's also other people who are talking. No, we're not just ignoring the people who want the show. We're not doing this just so you'll have to go back and listen to the 3-hour free will episode over and over again to get your own personal, sadistic pleasures. But there's a lot going on. There are some schedule conflicts, and I'll be moving my girlfriend to Texas in July and moving into a new apartment. And we do it at my place, so everything's chaotic at the moment with packing and whatnot, and we're planning on being back in August. In addition, anybody who doesn't get through on the telephone today or doesn't want to can email tv@atheist-community.org. That goes to myself, the co-host, most of the people behind the scenes. If you have questions, comments, criticisms, whatever you like, you can email and it goes through. We can't promise to reply to everybody, although I'd recommend you put either NPR or AETV in the subject line to make sure it gets through some spam filters. And after the show's done today, we do what we always do, which is we're going to Threadgills. We're on the air till 6 o'clock, and we'll be done at Threadgills around 6:30 or so. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. You don't even have to like us that much to attend. Just come on down. And by the way, somebody needs to remember to call Threadgills and tell them we're coming.
Yeah, that's kind of been an issue, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. But so you're getting ready to go actually?
Yeah, I'm going to be off for a month. I'm working as second assistant director on a feature film that's shooting up in East Texas. So it'll be nice. I can actually stay with my folks, who I haven't seen in a long time, and stay with them for an extended period of time, and work this job, which I'm sure will be very interesting. They always are, and never really quite sure what to expect, but. Yeah, so it means I'll be out of pocket and won't be blogging at the Atheist Experience blog for pretty much most of the month until after July 4th. But just letting everybody know, I'll be posting some regular updates about my job hijinks on Facebook. So if whoever hasn't Facebooked me already, do it. Go ahead. Otherwise, I'm looking forward to it. It's been, the sort of thing that I've been wanting to kind of get back in the saddle on. Cool. And so.
Well, we've got at least one caller queued up. As a reminder, we can put the telephone number up on the screen so that people can call in. Since we don't have a topic, obviously we're not going to ask you to stay on topic. And
it's going to be a very laid-back show, I think.
We never ask anybody to stay on topic anyway. Why are we here? Why the heck do you guys have a TV show? What is it you want to do? Are you trying to deconvert people from religion? The answer is a lot more complicated than I've given in the past, and it's yes and no. I'm primarily interested in finding out what people believe and why. My only, real concern is for truth. And I'm not going to believe something until somebody presents sufficient evidence, an argument, to justify belief. I think it's absurd to start believing things just because you haven't thought of a better answer, or because something sounded good. It needs to be a little bit more meat than that. So if you want to call in and talk about what you believe and why, that's greatly appreciated. If you want to talk about other current events that relate to church-state separation, religion, atheism, etc., that's fine as well.
Board of Education,
yeah,
oil spills. Whatever. Natural disasters.
I passed tons
famine.
of BP stations while I was on vacation because there's not a lot around here.
Yeah, but up where you were.
But up where I was, there were
East
tons
Coast,
of BP. And every time I went past, they've got this beautiful kind of like green sunflower logo, and I just wanted to take it home and Photoshop like oil all over, so it's one thing. But
yeah, I've seen, you can see some photographs on various news sites where the BP signs are being defaced.
Yeah.
Which I don't approve of, and it's not the right way to do.
Yeah.
Not the right way to deal with your displeasure about all this kind of thing.
So we'll go ahead and start taking calls. We've got Gary in Manhattan.
Yes, that's correct.
How are you, Gary?
I'm doing very good, Mr. Dillahunty. How about you?
Oh, just Matt. Matt's fine, but thanks, I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. The reason I was calling, I actually spoke with your co-host Martin, I believe it is, through an email, and I wanted to present a positive case here today for intelligent design.
Oh, all right.
Okay.
Yeah, specifically I wanted to discuss irreducible complexity and the Dover trial with you guys. First, I read on your Iron Chariots page, Matt, which I have to say is a very good encyclopedia, very informative. I hear intelligent design is just another form of creationism, and I wanted to ask, what makes you think that?
Well, first of all, I don't write everything that's up there at Iron Chariots. As a matter of fact, I probably haven't written much of what's up at Iron Chariots. But I have said before that intelligent design is creationism in a lab coat, or a Trojan horse for creationism, etc. And it's because mostly it's about the way that it's used. What happened? I mean, if you actually look it up, we've found the transitional form between creationism and intelligent design, and it's Kerr-design proponentists, and it was of pandas and people. Obviously, we talked about in the Dover trial. Everything.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt, but could I please respond to that point? Actually, the design proponentist.
Sure.
I'm really glad you brought this up because I realize this is one of the leading criticisms against intelligent design, and what I have in front of me here actually is both that reference to the exact quote which contains that term, and a copy of some other drafts actually of the book of Pandas and People, which for whatever reason are not quoted. And I'm reading some of the quotes from them here, and I'd like to read one of them onto the air. Because
what are the dates of those drafts? Because it was basically they bookended a Supreme Court ruling that removed creationism, and the drafts that came before it had creationism and creationists, and the drafts that came after it had intelligent design and intelligent design proponents.
Yeah, but my argument's not that the term wasn't in there. I mean, you read a lot of evolution writings and the term creationist is in there. But what I'm saying is from the content of the actual draft, they say statements like I have right here in front of me. Some master intellect is the creator of life, but such observable instances of information can't tell us if the intellect behind them is natural or supernatural. This is not a question that science can answer. And from what I gathered from my research, this is the same draft in which C-design proponentist was found. So what you have here is a quote that's basically saying, we know the supernatural is not part of science, we don't want to go there. So I feel like that's showing the context of the book. While the term creationist might not be in there, it's making it very clear that the purpose of this book is not to invoke the supernatural.
Well, it doesn't really matter, though. I mean, ultimately, what you have got going on here is a whole lot of spin that the creationist movement essentially concocted as a way of more or less passing what's called the lemon test, right? This whole issue of church-state separation violation. Creationism was not able to get a foothold in science classes because it was very clearly religiously motivated. And so they were like, well, clearly what we have to do is repackage this. We have to put this in some sort of form that sounds scientific, that passes legal muster, so that there cannot be any kind of objection to it on legal grounds in terms of promoting religion and religious teachings. And that's really what this whole exercise in replacing creator, with intelligent designer, with entity, whatever sort of safe word you might have, design proponents in replacing creationists. These are all just ways to sort of get around legal hassles.
And the proof of that is in the statement that you just read.
Yeah.
You read it, and you think that this is telling that they're not trying to muddle with science.
But it opens with a statement about a creator.
It opens with an intelligent creator, and they say it could be natural or supernatural. And yet they say this is beyond the realm of science. Well, if it's natural, it's not beyond science. So they're negating the possibility that it's natural as soon as they say that this is outside the realm of science.
Well, what they're saying in the passage that I just read to you is we understand that our theory of intelligent design might very well, in fact, have religious implications. But what they're saying is they want to stick to the claim that there may be signs of intelligence detectable in nature, such as looking at the bacterial flagellum and irreducible complexity. And okay, if we can
but claims about bacterial flagellum and irreducible complexity have all been blown out of the water in terms of being evidence for some sort of design. We understand the evolutionary processes that lead to these things, in organisms that that certain ID proponents are saying are evidence of irreducible complexity. Kenneth Miller has completely knocked irreducible complexity right off the table. And there's a lot of studying there's a lot of research and a lot of science done to understand.
The Ken Miller claim, you said Ken Miller completely blew irreducible complexity out of the water. I really would like to respond to that.
Yeah, well, if you can, sure. I mean, if you claim to know more about biology than one of the leading biologists in the country, who also happens to be a theist, by all means.
Well,
yeah, I never made that claim, sir, that I knew more about biologists than biologists in the country. What I'm saying is I think, and correctly I might add, Michael Behe and countless others in the intelligent design movement have responded to the claims that Dr. Miller has made, and I actually think Dr. Miller strawmans Dr. Behe's definition of irreducible complexity. And I have actually right in front of me here a quote from Michael Behe's Darwin's Black Box, page 40 for all the viewers who are watching over here. And it says, even if this is from Michael Behe's own book where he published this idea, even if the system is irreducibly complex, one can't definitively rule out the possibility of an indirect circuitous route. As the complexity of an interacting system increases, though the likelihood of such an indirect route drops precipitously, and as the number of unexplained, irreducibly complex biological systems increases, our confidence that Darwin's criterion of failure has been met skyrockets towards the maximum that science allows. So what Dr. Behe is saying in that passage that I just read is, yeah, co-option might work, indirect pathways for things like the flagellum might have been found, but the more of those things you find, that if you remove one part away, the system doesn't work.
But that's exactly where Miller completely knocks Behe's point out of the water, because Behe's whole idea about IC is that what you just said. If you remove one part of this entire complex mechanism that he is saying is irreducibly complex, if you remove one part, then it can't work.
As it had its current function, for example. So let's talk about
who cares?
But who cares?
Who
the
cares?
whole point is Miller gives Miller gives a very clear example in which no fewer than 40 elements are removed from the flagellum's tail. And they have a function. They have, as Matt said, the function is simply different. Okay? Elements of an organism have a function, and then they come together. A different function is now performed. The original function is no longer formed, but they simply do other things in their earlier stages.
I understand your point, and I understand Dr. Miller's point. What Behe is saying here is, first of all, if you concede the point, you move one part away, the flagellum doesn't function as a motor. That's what Behe is saying. Now, if you find other systems that do that, what Miller has attempted to do with the Type 3 secretory system, which is, I believe, is what you're referring to, with taking away 40 of the flagellum's 50 proteins, what Miller is saying is, yeah, we found something that might be an intermediate. What Behe is saying is, one is you have to account for now this huge indirect process for all of these systems which are irreducibly complex. Because one part away, the system can't function in its present form.
Hang on. Before we get to the furthermore, I put it that nobody has demonstrated that a system is in fact irreducibly complex. They have just asserted it, and it is an argument from ignorance. It is a claim that, look at this system, we can't think of anything that it could do or any other way that it could have come about. Therefore, I will declare it to be irreducibly complex. And I assert that that is an argument from ignorance. First, you need to actually demonstrate that an irreducibly complex system exists. And when Behe has tried with his prime examples, it has been demonstrated that, in fact, that is not an irreducibly complex system, provided we allow for function to change.
Okay, Matt, just so I just want to clarify something that you just said. Are you saying over here that irreducible complexity is not falsifiable, or just that no irreducibly complex system has been presented? I just want to clear that up. Because that's a big difference here. Are you saying the concept is not testable?
Both, because as irreducible complexity has been presented, I would say it is an argument from ignorance, in that we can't think of anything, any other function, and therefore this system is irreducibly complex, is the way that has been asserted in the past. And so those assertions have been, I would say, unfalsifiable. Whether or not the prospect is entirely unfalsifiable, I don't know. First, we need somebody to actually demonstrate a system that's irreducibly complex, and also demonstrate how they came by the understanding that it was in fact irreducibly complex. And neither of those has taken place.
I disagree with you completely. I think actually both of them have taken place.
What are the examples?
I'll respond to both of them. First of all, I have a quote here from Judge Jones's ruling in the Kitzmiller versus Stover trial, page 76. Judge Jones actually says right here, and this is from the testimony from Dr. Kenneth Miller and Dr. Robert Pennock, the two expert witnesses in the case, as irreducible complexity is only a negative argument against evolution, it is refutable and accordingly testable. So what you have here, and he cites Miller's testimony for that. Mm-hmm. So Judge Jones agrees that the concept as a whole is in fact falsifiable. Dr. Behe, and I think he's done correctly, is you go and you take a bacterial flagellum and you knock out one of its proteins. If it can't function as a motor, under Behe's definition, it's irreducibly complex. So I don't know.
Well, that's the whole problem. What we're trying to tell you is we don't think, and quite frankly, the majority of people in Behe's profession don't think that his definition has any sort of validity.
What difference does it make?
He's setting these parameters, okay, as a way of saying, all right, well, here is a way in which something can be, under my definition, irreducibly complex and cannot have evolved into the form it's in now. And it's the premise, okay, by which he establishes these definitions that is not held to be valid. Let me ask you something. Let me just and let's do this without reading extensive quotations, okay? If you think intelligent design is valid as a scientific concept,
okay,
then let's talk about falsifiable.
Sure.
How it's falsifiable.
Absolutely.
What do you think a non-designer designed universe / life form / world would look like? What would a world and full of life or not full of life look like that was non-God designed?
So how would I falsify the entire theory of intelligent design is what you're saying?
Well, first of all, it's
not a theory.
There's no theory. This is the concept, the hypothesis, the premise of intelligent design. The premise is...
falsify the hypothesis of intelligent design?
Dude, just intelligent design. Intelligent design meaning that all of this, everything here that we see, that we live, ourselves, our world, our universe, people, dogs, cats, these are the product of intelligent design. In other words, some sort of designer, an intelligent agency, put this together with teleological intent, like there was a goal in mind. That's the premise of intelligent design. Am I correct, or am I stating that incorrectly?
Well, the premise of intelligent design is just that there are certain features in biology that are best explained by an intelligent cause. I mean, to the degree that, as far as that goes, I mean, that's debated even amongst the intelligent design proponents. You have some who reject common descent, then you have some who accept common descent.
Fine, but I'm just talking at a basic level. What would a non-intelligently designed universe look like? What would a non-intelligently designed life form look like?
Okay, well, you would be able... Well, that's the thing. The way I would falsify it is I would go and I would find... even Richard Dawkins admits that there's an appearance of design in nature. I mean, in his book...
But appearances aren't realities, right? We're talking about just... If you want to state as a hypothesis...
Okay.
The universe, planet Earth, and all living things upon it are the product of the design on the part of an intelligent agency, whether it's natural, supernatural, God, the Great Pumpkin, whoever. Okay? In order to understand that it's cold outside, you have to have a frame of reference. You have to understand what hot is to understand that it's cold. You see what I'm saying? So, in order to understand, in order to be able to say this is a designed universe, what would a non-designed world look like? What would a non-God designed living thing look like?
Well, to falsify intelligent design, what I would do is I would go and find things that supposedly have the designed attributes like specified complexity, and then prove that they weren't in fact made by design. Because you have certain properties like the high improbability that it could have came about by chance, combined with the fact that it resembled something that has a high degree of specification that appears to be designed.
Okay, but
take something that meets what supposedly is the design criteria, like the bacterial flagellum, and show that this thing that appears designed, not just that it doesn't look like it was produced by evolution, but has the appearance of design. It resembles, it bespeaks, it screams out that it was designed. Now show me that wasn't.
But you understand, and
you falsified the theory.
And you understand. Yes,
no,
but
that's a shifting of the burden of proof.
That is completely not how it's done.
Yes, the hell it's not. Give me a second. First of all, intelligent design is nothing but a big argument from ignorance. All of it. Because how do you recognize that something is designed?
Because it resembles characteristics of things that
that is an inductive argument by analogy, and it is an appeal to ignorance. This looks designed, therefore it was. That's false. It is not a sound argument.
Sir, I have actually, I know you said you didn't want to hear extensive quotations, but I mean, even Bill Gates, who I think has a far more knowledge in computer programming, admits that the DNA is literally a computer program, but far more complex.
Congratulations! You're now quoting billionaire software designers with respect to biology. How much further out there you want to go? Why don't you address address the point that I made instead of something that is completely irrelevant?
I did address your point.
No, you didn't.
No, see,
I asked a question. I asked how do you determine that something is designed by an intelligence?
And I said, you say it's an argument from analogy, but what I would do is, like biologists have done, find things in nature that do at first.
Here you go. You find things in nature that look designed.
Let him finish.
Okay. You find things in nature that first have the appearance of design. I mean, people who are evolutionists have said the bacterial flagellum looks like it's a motor. I swear
to God, if you just quote one more person instead of actually having a discussion, I'll hang up.
You don't want me to cite credible sources?
I want you to have it. I don't give a damn what you cite. I want to actually have a discussion where we address the issue and you answer the question. And the question's pretty simple. How do you go about determining that something was intelligently designed? You can answer that without saying so-and-so says.
Yeah, I mean, I'm simply asking, when I asked you in the first place, what does a non-God designed universe look like? I'm wanting to get your ideas, okay? Just at a baseline level, to be able to look at a thing and go, okay, that's designed and that wasn't. How do you make that simple distinction? I don't want to go into big rigmarole about how the process is.
What the hell Bill Gates thinks.
Yeah, what this or that other biologist or software designer thinks. Just in terms of, at a basic level, understanding it's cold outside. How do I know it's cold outside? Because I know what it's like when it's hot outside. The basic frames of reference, in order to be able to draw these comparisons between design and non-design, between hot and cold, between any things where there is an opposite to be understood. In order to comprehend design, it seems to me that you ought to have a pretty good idea of what it means to be non-designed. Okay, so at a very basic level, how do you, not Bill Gates, not one of these other sources that you want to quote to us, how do you go about determining that?
Sure. You go in nature and you see systems that are motors, literally are motors or are computer programs like the DNA molecule and the bacterial flagellum. Then go and see if they're irreducibly complex, see if they're in fact complex specified information, whether they could have come about very probably by chance, or in fact they couldn't. Then if they have a very specific purpose, and as well as that, there's a good chance that it might very well be designed.
And at any point during this process, do you ever take into consideration the fact that there is a very well-established scientific discipline in evolutionary biology that shows how these life forms, these organisms, these parts of our ecosystem, they do appear to have a sense of purpose, a sense of design, but we understand evolutionarily how they got there, how each of these things fits into its own niche naturally.
Well, I didn't say every system is an irreducibly complex system. I said that was great to go and look for in specific systems. Even, nobody would make the claim that every single system is irreducibly complex. That would be ridiculous to say something like that.
Well,
but that wasn't what I was getting at.
I'm still waiting for an answer to my question, because when I asked how you determine that something is intelligently designed, you said you go out in nature and find something that looks designed, and then you demonstrate that it's irreducibly complex. And then you can make the case that it was most probably intelligently designed. That is not anything that even remotely resembles science or the process of demonstrating something, because all you did was say, I go out and find something that looks designed, and if I can't find a way that it's not irreducibly complex, I'm going to go ahead and believe that the best explanation is that there's an intelligent designer. That is not how we recognize intelligent design. I can tell you how we recognize intelligent design. For example, I made this the other day. It's a chainmail bracelet, really simple thing. I could leave this outside and everybody would be able to tell that it was intelligently designed. And it has nothing to do with complexity. It has to do with every single example we have of anything remotely like this is designed, and we have no examples that this occurs naturally. It is a contrast between naturally occurring and non-naturally occurring. That is how you determine whether or not something is intelligently designed. And it is folly for quasi-biologists to go around asserting that biological systems for which we have a good understanding of how they reproduced naturally are intelligent design. And that is why I keep saying that this is a big argument from ignorance, and it is creationism in a lab coat.
And earlier on, you again, you talked about how you thought Kenneth Miller was strawmanning a lot of Behe's arguments, but all through your explanations, I hear you talking about making the usual creationist errors, where you talk about, well, if it's either just by chance or it has a purpose. But of course, anyone who's studied evolution knows it's not a pure chance process. There is nothing simply random and simply chancy about natural selection or punctuated equilibrium or any of the various theories of evolutionary processes that are out there. Evolution isn't simply, it's not this false dichotomy between chance or intent.
Yeah, it's not taking all the parts of a motor and throwing them in a pile and seeing if they produce something. That's not the way evolution works. So when you misrepresent this as either it's chance or it was intelligently designed, you are poisoning the well so that your argument looks more appealing. That's a straw man that you're attacking as soon as you start talking about chance.
Okay, let me respond to both points. First about the falsifiability of intelligent design, and then I'll respond to the word randomness, then, which is essentially what you're getting at. As for Matt, I think that was a great analogy, and I agree with you completely about how you would recognize that the bracelet is designed and everything. But if you go and you take the flagellum, which has been accepted by many, many biologists to literally be a motor, function as a motor, any single motor I've ever seen is the product of intelligence.
No,
when you find a more sophisticated motor,
we're back to the
why is it preposterous to go and say it might be from a designer?
Well, because we have evidence that it occurs naturally.
What evidence do we have of a motor ever appearing naturally? That's what I'm not understanding. Because any motor,
First of all,
that I've seen come from some kind of design.
First of all, you've already given the example, and that's the bacterial flagellum. Now, second of all, you're making the same equivocation fallacy problem that we had 3 weeks ago when I was in the show, where the guy called in to talk about DNA as a code, and I tried to explain how he was confusing himself. When we say that some things are, that DNA is a code, yes, in many respects it is, but that is an analogy, and it is improper to imply that it is a code in the common sense of the word, where a code is to convey intelligent information from one intelligence to another. DNA does not do that. DNA is an entirely mechanical, chemical process. It's not conveying information from an intelligence to an intelligence. So it is a code by analogy. In the sense of the bacterial flagellum, when we call it a motor, we are saying it operates as a motor. That is a description of what it does. Just as my arm is a fulcrum.
Okay,
so what?
My eye is a camera.
It operates as a motor. So what I'm saying is, why can't? I mean, we're using mechanical terms. We're using the terms that we use to describe machines to describe the thing. So why can't we take that extra step and say, well, maybe it's not just an appearance of design, as somebody like Richard Dawkins would like to say, or maybe it really is design. I mean,
because you can't make that huge leap. It's like Mark was just saying. We could say that my eye is a camera. But now we have an example of man-made cameras and cameras that occur naturally. You can't make the leap to say that because it has a function, it might probably have been designed and not just have the appearance of design, and therefore we're justified in believing there's an intelligent designer. Yeah. There's a huge gap there that you have not crossed with anything more than this is what I want to believe.
Yeah, I mean the simple similarity.
That's not true, Matt.
What did you cross it with?
That's all we want to believe. That's not the criteria.
What did you cross that gap with?
The simple similarity in function between something in nature and something that is an artifact, a man-made artifact, is not in and of itself evidence or even an argument that the thing that occurs in nature therefore must have been designed and intentionally constructed just like the artifact was.
I mean, if the only ponds you had ever come across were ones that had been designed by landscapers, when you came across a pond that wasn't designed by a landscaper, you might be inclined to think that it was designed by a landscaper, and you'd be wrong. And that's the difference between deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. So if you think you crossed that gap with more than this is what I want to believe, what did you cross the gap from there's an appearance of design to therefore it was intelligently designed? Where's the gap crosser?
Okay, 2 points actually. One, I'm not saying absolutely 100% we know for a fact that it's designed. I mean, no scientist would say they're 100% sure really about really any theory, 100% certain.
Did I say
it probably?
Did I say 100% certain at any time? I don't even recall the last show where I said that, because I reject absolute certainty across the board. You don't need to tell me about that. You need to answer the question.
Well, you said to me, how do we make that leap from it appears to be designed that we know it was designed? So I'm saying we don't know for 100%.
But I never said 100%, so skip it and get to the answer.
Okay. Besides having the appearance of design, besides really being a motor or functioning as a motor, if it's irreducibly complex, if it contains complex specified information, and it resembles things that we normally say are designed.
But we know it's not irreducibly complex because...
Why can't we say that it might be designed? I mean, I'm giving you several criteria on here to evaluate.
Well, because from the very basic level of its premise to begin with, we know that Behe's idea of irreducible complexity isn't valid, because we can take that little flagellum motor apart. We can, where Behe says, if you take one thing apart, none of it works.
Right? As a flagellum. As a flagellum.
But it's something. But see, that's the false
that's the
criteria.
false premise that is defining intelligent design into existence. Right. I reject his definition as useless. It doesn't even. Does it have any predictive value?
Does it have any well, you can predict what systems will be irreducibly complex, and
how?
the way you test
How?
that is
how?
How do you predict it?
Yeah, I mean, before something is supposedly irreducibly complex, if all of its individual parts can't do anything because they haven't yet formed...
Can't do the same job.
Because they haven't yet formed the irreducibly complex thing that doesn't exist yet, how do you propose to look at all of these individual elements and predict that together they would form an irreducibly complex deal? How do you have that predictive...
Well, the way you falsify or you have to take the complete system and then try to take out a part. And the idea is if it can.
Right, but if that complete system doesn't exist, how see from an evolutionary standpoint, right?
Yeah.
You could say, in order to get this kind of organism or this kind of system, to work in a certain way, we would need to see these kinds of processes, these earlier stages, as it were, just like rough drafts leading up to the final draft. We would have to see a record of this. And if you look, from the evolutionary premise, you can take the allegedly irreducibly complex flagellum tail, take out bits of its motor, and see, okay, before these things were the things that are making a tail motor, they did other things. They had other functions. And we see how they developed to get to from where they were then to what they are now. If you take intelligent design as your premise, well, then how do you say, well, at what point did the designer take this little gizmo that did a thing and pop it into some other thing and make it this new thing that is irreducibly complex? Where do you see that in the whole developmental process of this organism?
I mean, this is
where you can now identify and say there is the scientific evidence of an intelligent designer at hand. And once it was like this, and now it's like this, and there is a specific thing we can point to, which is the intervention of an intelligent agency and can be no other thing.
This is probably not morphologically accurate, but take the human nose, for example. Really, it's fairly simple. Right now, I smell with mine. I can also breathe with it, but generally I smell with it because I could breathe with my mouth if I was, in Virginia. But
Zing.
Once upon a time, that nose might have had a different function where smell wasn't part of it. So what it seems to me is that now we have a good understanding of this and its various functions, but it seems to me that Behe's definition says, if I take a part away and it no longer has the same function, aha, it's irreducibly complex.
Yes, and then the point is, it's and the more systems like that you find, the more improbable it is that because now you have to account for an indirect pathway for each and every one of these systems. And I mean, Behe argues that there's hundreds of these systems out there, and now essentially for every one of these systems that you have to explain with an indirect pathway, I mean, you have to first account for the fact that at some point in time, all the parts are together, then they were synchronized the right way, in the same place, at the same time.
No, you don't have to. No, you don't have to, and that's the response that real evolutionary biologists have been putting out for years. You don't have to have them all in place, all at the same time, all synchronized. Some of them can have different functions for long periods of time. Some of them can have no function. Evolution doesn't just select for something, it selects against things, and as long as something is relatively innocuous, like for example, my earlobe doesn't really have any good function. But who knows? Maybe a million years down the line, my earlobe will, evolve into something, or the human earlobe, not mine, I'll be dead, will evolve into something that some future intelligence will claim is irreducibly complex. It is, as I said at the outset, an argument from ignorance. It is, as I said a moment ago, a definition that is defining intelligent design into existence. There's no reason to accept Behe's definition of irreducible complexity as useful or valid in any sense. Sorry.
The reason why I'm saying it's useful is because because before you found out that the system was irreducibly complex, you could have said that it could have just evolved in a very direct way, step by step by step.
No, you couldn't have.
You have to account for an indirect pathway because
Gary, this is where you keep getting things wrong, Gary. You keep talking about, well, you can just make this leap, or you could just said this, or you could have just decided this, or this isn't how we determine things in science. You look at evidence, you look at lineages, you look at you look at the actual data that's out there. It's not a matter of, well, you could just say this or you could just say that, and so why not just say the thing that makes the most sense? Which seems to be the whole idea that you're trying to sell us here.
You just said that without irreducible complexity, you could claim that it came by direct evolution. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. You are making the implication that irreducible complexity is not only a valid hypothesis, but that it's necessary in order for us to determine the actual process. And the answer to that is, you're freaking wrong, because science is going to explain that or not explain it based on the evidence and going where the evidence leads. You don't need irreducible complexity as a stopgap or as a bridge that leads somewhere, because as I mentioned before, where it's leading you is to the intelligent design conclusion, and it's doing so without any basis at all. It is an argument from analogy. It is an argument from ignorance.
Begging the question.
It is Everything that could be wrong with it is. And when I asked before about how you bridge this gap between something looks designed and therefore it is most likely designed, your answer is Michael Behe's definition of irreducible complexity.
Oh, that wasn't my answer to that question. I'll
No,
clarify that
no,
answer for
Gary,
you now, if you would like.
Gary, that was your answer. Yours was just a lot longer. You bridge the gap between it looks designed and it most probably is designed by appealing to Behe's definition of irreducible complexity.
That's part of it, but that's not the whole. That's not all
What's
that you
the rest
do.
of it?
The rest of it is, first of all, determine how probable it is that it could have formed by, if you don't want to use the word random, an unguided process. And
how do you do that?
Have a high degree of specification.
How do you assess the probability? What's your denominator? What?
Okay, I'm not a mathematician to it, but I mean,
Obviously.
Well, I mean, yeah, I'm a college student. I don't have a PhD in mathematics.
No, but you understand probabilities, right?
I said that's the way you would go about doing it. I
Right,
can't
and
say
if
that
you
I've done it
have no
myself.
other examples, if you have nothing to compare it to, if you have no way of determining the denominator, you can't come up with a probability.
Yeah, because this just gets you back to my question again, Gary. It's like if you want to assert that a thing is designed, if you want to assert that there is a higher probability that a thing is designed than otherwise, then you have to know certain things. You have to know what would this thing be like were it not designed. You have to have a definition of non-design to use as a frame of reference to set against your definition of design. And if you want to say there's a greater probability of one over the other, you have to know how to work out that probability.
And if you're assessing,
I mean, when they say here what the probability is of winning the Powerball every week, I mean that's an actual. They work that math out based on real data. You know, in terms of how many tickets are bought by people, what the jackpot is, you know, how many states the sales are in, et cetera, how many millions of people are out there spending their dollars on Powerball every week. They actually, and then what the likelihood of the numbers coming up in the little spinning machine, right? I mean, that's actual data. They don't just come up with 1 in 37 million jillion off the top of their heads. They work that out. So if you want to work out the greater probability of a designed life form with a non-designed life form, you have to know what both of those things look like, and you have to have your data points to be able to make that probability. You can't just say, well, it looks that way, so it just seems more likely. And that really has been, and that really has been all you've been saying this entire conversation. Well, it looks more likely.
There's one more thing that he said, which is something that creationists have said a lot of, in addition to the it looks this way, therefore it most likely is this way, is this issue of probability. And that is an argument that, well, evolution just seems so unlikely.
Well, why is that? Well, that's a valid claim. I mean, I know people on both sides of the debate who have supposedly calculated the mathematical improbabilities for it. I mean, I know for a fact that this issue was discussed in the Dover trial and on the intelligent design side of it. I know Dr. William Dembski has written extensive algorithms on the subject.
Yeah, and I know why he's wrong. He makes the same mistake that a lot of creationists make, and that is that they assume that this thing must have occurred once, and you're doing one trial instead of a pool of resources with continual attempts. And this is all about abiogenesis anyway, and now we're way off, and we've had you on for like 30 minutes or so. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to another caller.
All right, we're not taking my call, guys.
We appreciate the arguments.
I appreciate it. We're not going to agree, and primarily we're not going to agree because you accept that Behe's definition of irreducible complexity is valid and useful, and I think it's a steaming pile of crap.
So we're just not on the same page with premises.
On this one, and I mean, again, thank you for your time.
Unfortunately, that whole agree to disagree and everybody has an opinion is useless because there is such a thing as truth, and there are such things as right answers, and I'm going to believe that we have the best right answer when it's actually supported by the evidence and not supported by analogy, induction, looks designed, therefore is most likely designed. The time to believe that there's a designer is when it's actually been demonstrated to be most likely true, not a second before.
Well, I'm going to believe that the methods that Dr. Behe and Dr. Dembski have used, and as well as the other design theorists who identify design in nature, as I've said to you before, irreducible complexity and specified complexity. I think that those are valid ways to do it. I mean,
well, good for you, but you're incorrect. So let's
cool. And there's plenty of people that believe if they pray they'll get better, but it's not necessarily the case. And when we put it to the test, it doesn't make it. So, Matt in Buffalo, thanks for hanging on.
Am I on?
You are.
You are on at last.
Bet you thought that wouldn't happen.
You guys were very patient with that last caller. I commend you.
Well, we try.
That's
I really enjoy your show. Thanks for taking my call.
sure.
Sure, what do you got?
A couple weeks ago, I was witnessed to by a pair of Jehovah's Witnesses. And normally I would have just closed the door, but I guess I was in a good enough mood to humor them. And, being a doomsday religion, essentially, the first thing they have to convince you of is that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, and you have to make the right decision right now, immediately. Mm-hmm. And
which I've always thought was weird for them, because don't they have this whole only 144,000 people get through the door thing?
Well, they think that 144,000 reign in heaven.
Okay. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please go on.
God. No, it's all right. It's all right. But anyway, they believe that everyone else who is not part of the 144,000 that is also saved reigns on earth in a physical realm.
Okay, whatever.
So, yeah, it is a bit strange. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they sort of took it as a given that I was simply going to accept this premise that the world is awful and getting worse and worse every day. So much so that they almost didn't even pause to wait for my response. And I did respond, and I said I don't agree with that. I said, in fact, I think in many ways the world is better than it's ever been.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Mm-hmm. Right. And a curious thing happened at that point, which I did not expect. I had been witnessed to by Jehovah's Witnesses before. And one of them was just awestruck by the fact that I did not simply take it for granted that this was a true premise. Yeah, right.
Wait, you're not following my script.
He sounded like a broken record. He was just shaking his head and blinking. Well, how can you not think this?
Yeah.
And the other one was kind of quiet for a moment, and he said, "Well, why don't you think that?" And I was impressed with that question. I really was. It was not something that a Jehovah's Witness had ever asked me before.
Okay.
And I have Jehovah's Witnesses in my extended family, so it's something that I've been exposed to from time to time.
All right.
And that is simply not a question that they ask very often, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now it was only a short conversation. We weren't obviously going to fully convince anyone to change their minds on an opinion, but it did get me to thinking about the nature of false belief versus dogma. And I know, Matt, that something you're fond of saying on your show is your belief informs your actions.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree with that. I think it's true. But I also think that it's incomplete. I also believe that your actions can inform your beliefs. And because he took a second, for whatever reason, to simply ask why I felt a certain way, I actually got him to nod, at least in implied agreement to some of the things I was saying. I don't know that I actually changed his mind on anything.
Yeah.
Well, you exposed him to
I'm
a
sorry,
perspective that he has simply never been exposed to before.
Well,
And,
the one that took the time to listen to me was substantially younger than the other. I don't know if that had anything to do with it. The more resistant one was a guy he looked to be in his late middle age. Mm-hmm. And he may have just had longer to root himself into to an unchanging belief.
Yeah, probably.
But I think that ultimately the biggest obstacle is not false belief, not even strongly held false belief, but rather the inability to ever change your mind.
Right.
And I saw both of those things right in front of my face from people that I wouldn't ever have expected to see it from.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah.
It's rare that it happens, but it's good when it happens.
The rareness is what actually inspired me to call you in the first place. I thought it was not something that I had ever seen before.
Well, cool. Thanks a lot for calling.
Yeah, and you're probably right that it's the older fella has had much longer to get set in his ways, and you do get set in your ways as you get older, and so you're right. Not to say that you will have fully rescued the younger guy from his indoctrination from that, but the point is you did expose him to a way of thinking about things that was different than he had been exposed to, and he's still perhaps a little bit receptive to at least acknowledging that there's another way of thinking out there instead of just blindly parroting what he's being told.
Right. Well, I'm not hoping for a rapid, deep change, but we all start somewhere, right?
Well, in many ways, when you're going around assessing how good or bad something is, you're doing it with respect to your expectations instead of making a determination of whether or not something is better than it used to be or worse than it used to be. So if you don't get the raise you were expecting, you might overlook the fact that you still got a raise. And when you have a religion where your expectations of what the world should be could never possibly be met, where they are these, absolutely insane utopian ideas, and by the way, they know full well that it won't be met, then any departure from that can be kind of expanded as, oh, look how much worse we are. Once upon a time we had prayer in schools and now we don't. Well, yeah, I'd say that's that's an improvement. Sorry.
Thanks a lot, guys, for taking my call.
Hey, sure, thank you.
Thanks for waiting.
All right. Bye-bye.
I wish I got more door-to-doors. I don't.
No, the only people that come door to door are like.
I had the two Mormon dudes
guys
that I talked about on my blog.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I was much younger, we had some Jehovah's Witnesses that would canvass our neighborhoods. And if I knew then what I knew now, sort of thing. So it was.
I had Mormons call, and I had a really long conversation with the guy on the phone.
Yeah.
And he actually called me back. To have another conversation afterwards. And then I told him about the show and other stuff because I asked questions that obviously he had never received in his scripted phone process there.
Yeah.
So we got Doug in L.A.
Oh, yeah. Hey, I'm on the show.
Yeah, you are, Doug. How are you?
How about that?
Oh, man. That first dude took like half an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we thought about that, but it's kind of it was sort of the hearty argument that people say they want from us, so we tried to give our best.
All right. Well, I'd just like to say I am a theist, but I'm not Christian. I'm not of the Abrahamic religions. It's just because they never really clicked for me. There was a lot of strange stuff in their holy books, especially the Bible. Like Adam and Eve had 2 children, and they were both boys, but then they have grandchildren out of nowhere. I mean,
yeah. Well, the apologists have ways of sort of getting around that strange little detail, but
Nephilim.
yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but,
go ahead.
I mean, it's still. I mean, I don't know. It just doesn't work for me. But basically, I wanted to talk about the Gaia hypothesis and stuff. I'm sure you know what it is.
The Earth as a
living
entity.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming that there's an intelligence behind this as well.
No. It's not quite like that.
I have no problem at all to saying that the Earth is alive in both a literal sense in some areas and in a poetic sense, as a uniform ecosystem. I don't see where there's any value on expanding that to some kind of statement about a religious statement or
spiritual stuff.
Well, yeah, except that word's so useless.
Yeah, right, exactly.
What you said none of the Abrahamic religions clicked, which kind of tells me that you were looking for religion based on, kind of a visceral feel. So what was it about the Gaia hypothesis that clicked?
I don't know, I mean, it just all made sense, it wasn't like, I mean, to a certain extent, there was, it wasn't all done, like, it's not all 100% factual. There isn't, like, conclusive, like, research about it, but it's all,
I agree.
As the hypothesis goes, it works for now, and it's completely believable.
How does it work if we already know that the Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago from the accretion disk of the sun? I mean, how does that become a living entity that imbues some kind of purposefulness or whatever?
Well, I don't even know if you think that it's the purposefulness comes into it. I mean, is that even part of the Gaia hypothesis? It's
not really, but
yeah,
I mean, for me at least, I'm actually a pagan, but I believe. I mean, you guys probably think. I mean, you guys don't believe in anything supernatural anyway.
Let me give you my impressions of where I think that all this is about. What we do as people is we try to understand the world and the universe in our own terms, right? I mean, in terms that are relatable to us. And intelligent design is a more, shall we say, faux intellectual, I think, shall we say, ideologically strident form of that activity. What you're talking about is not, doesn't quite take the same approach, but both of them are ways of attempting to understand the world in vaguely human or explicitly human terms. And when I say human terms, the notion of a living entity, the idea, like I have friends who talk about the universe, meant for me to, have a good day today and stuff like, placing, anthropomorphizing the world and the universe around us, right? Giving it human characteristics simply to make it relatable and simply to make the universe seem like it is a less big, scary, cold, empty vacuum place in which we're all alone and it's big and scary, right? Which, when you think about it, so I don't know if you remember how far you go back with the cartoons. There was a comic strip in the 1980s with a little character lying there called Bloom County. And little character, and he's sitting there contemplating the whole universe, and by the end of it, he's so mind blown, and he just sits in a little corner eating a cookie, and it says, "This just makes me want to eat a cookie." The whole vastness of eternity really can be intimidating and frightening and terrifying. And so what we do with things like either these Earth religions or the Gaia hypothesis or finding God in a man in a big white beard or in some sort of human face to put on this big universe to make it less lonely and scary and less empty and more human and warmer and something that's there that actually cares about us.
Yeah, it's appealing.
Yeah.
My only concern is whether or not it's true.
That's cool. I mean, I get it, but have you guys heard the Greek creation myth, perchance?
Probably, although I'm pretty sure there's not just one.
Right, yeah. I mean, the one that I'm familiar with, basically, it goes a little something like this. It's like, in the beginning, there was, just chaos and darkness. It was just a dark void. But, within that thing, like, all that exists now was in there. And over a long lapse of ages, like eons and eons, chaos sort of, came to be, what it is today. But they gave, they sort of gave personalities to all of these different things. Like, the void was called a certain deity, and then eventually when the chaos, subsided, it was Gaia, who is the earth, obviously, and then Uranus, who is, like, the stars or the heavens, which we can now, like, sort of interpret to mean, like, space or, like, whatever's above it and, stuff like that. And it's sort of, I mean, if you take away all of the deities and stuff, it's very similar to what, science thinks about how, the Earth was formed.
No, it's really not.
Well, I mean, superficially at best, right?
I mean, it's as akin to how science thinks the Earth was formed as it is to how a cake was formed, in that at one time there wasn't a cake, and at some later time there was a cake. I mean, when you're that vague,
all the dough,
you can make anything.
Sugar came together.
There's a process by which a cake is made and a process by which a planet is made. And saying there was no cake and then somebody threw ingredients together and there was a cake is not an accurate description.
It's not a very good. A recipe book that just said throw all this stuff together would not make a very good cake for you.
Yeah. So I mean,
and that's just it. They didn't have the recipe then, right? So they came up with these other explanations involving gods and deities and anthropomorphizing, natural phenomena they didn't understand.
We see this all over the place in all kinds of religions, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that creation myths and religious accounts for the unexplained are very similar for three reasons. One, we are all similar, so our brains work kind of the same way. The events are similar or identical. If you're trying to explain, where lightning comes from, you're trying to explain lightning. So the pool of explanations for lightning is somewhat limited by the fact that we're talking about lightning. It's further limited by the fact that we're the ones who are doing the thinking. And we also are incredibly prone to arguing by analogy, comparison, inductive reasoning, in that I've seen this happen this way so many times that it makes sense that when I see something else, it might have come about by, a similar explanation. This is an evolutionary trait that's incredibly beneficial to us as kids, this reliance on authority and the trust that the world tomorrow is going to be pretty much the same as it is today. And we get right answers probably way more often than we get wrong answers. But when it goes wrong, it goes horribly wrong. And when we say that, how come there's so many of these creation myths that all sound kind of similar and some of them got things that are actually kind of right? And it's because we were similar, they're explaining a similar thing, and we're not complete idiots. We weren't even back then. There's night follows day, day follows night type thing. There's this progression, and it's not surprising that somebody would come up with a creation story for the universe that, I don't know, makes some kind of sense, because perhaps the creation stories for the universe that made absolutely no sense never got written down. Those people were just a little too crazy to have their ideas published.
They were so dumb they just didn't come up with writing. And
we're talking about long before writing. So these are the stories that were passed along in families, at campfires, and societies.
And so they'll change.
And it's because they had appeal. It's because they resonated with so many people in there. It's the reason why Hollywood doesn't produce anything new. It's because the stories that resonate with us keep getting retold in lots of different ways.
Oh, yeah. I can see that. I can definitely say that that's, pretty likely. But for me, I sort of believe in the supernatural. I don't know why. I'm not closed-minded to this whole atheism thing. When I left Christianity, I knew I wanted to be religious, but I wasn't like saying, this is like the one true way or anything. And I never vibed with that sort of thing. So all of the things you guys are telling me, you guys make sense. But
so let me ask you this: why? You said when you left Christianity, you knew you wanted to be religious. Why?
Because you guys are obviously going to say that this is just me hallucinating, but I felt like a presence in my room, and I saw like this figure, like this ghostly figure walking through, and I was like, oh, okay, so there must be more out there. And obviously that was just a one-time experience. It could have been a bunch of chemicals in my brain making me hallucinate. It could be.
Or you might have seen something. There could be 1,000 explanations. My question is, what is it about the proposed religious explanations that make you think that of all the possible explanations, that's the one that's most probable?
It's just that since I've had a supernatural, or what I believe to be a supernatural experience, it opens the door to all of these things. And, Gaia especially, who I believe in as like sort of a literal being through the extension of the planet, it's so universal. Like, there hasn't been really a single, civilization on Earth that doesn't believe in, like, an Earth deity or something. And you guys have already covered that, this is just, like, relatable. They're anthropomorphizing, natural things. And, that's fine. But, I don't know. That's just the way I see it.
Okay.
All right. Because that is pretty much what we think you're doing, is that you're finding a way to put a human face on the world and the universe. And
there's a difference in how certain people approach reality. And some of us are far more concerned with getting to the truth of things, of believing only things that we have really good reason to think are true, and rejecting as unproven those things which have not reached that level. And obviously, I fit into that category. So if I were to have an experience that someone else might write off as supernatural, I'm not going to immediately say, whoops, I was wrong, there's something supernatural. I now think that that's the most plausible explanation. But I'm also not going to say, clearly that wasn't supernatural, I must have eaten something that gave me hallucination, or I'm not going to write off this possibility. I'm going to say, here's something that I don't have a good explanation for. Let me see if I can figure out what it is. And until I find an explanation, I'm damn sure not going to accept one. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to accept some scientific explanation or some supernatural explanation until it's supported by evidence.
Yeah.
And that's I guess
the trick
is how much you want to go on your gut.
Being willing to resist this one feels good explanation.
Yeah, this one keeps me from being too confused and asking more questions.
Yeah. So yeah, it's avoiding the comforting explanation, regardless of whether or not it's true, simply because, well, that sounds good, and I'll go on and not have to think about this anymore. So, not to say that that's what you're doing, but a lot of people do that, and we just encourage you to keep thinking.
But anyway, Doug, I appreciate the call.
Yeah.
Yeah, can I just
Sure.
say one more thing? All right, yeah, I mean, I get it, but I mean, one thing, and I'll admit, I'll probably be like the first person on this show to ever admit it, but back when I was a Christian, not only did things not really make sense to me, but like, I mean, obviously everybody knows the Christian scare tactic of the devil. I've been pushed, I've been, forced to believe all of that stuff since I was born, really. And I mean, I realized one day that the only reason I was still in Christianity was because I was scared that if I wasn't, I'd go to hell, I'd burn forever. And, I never saw the devil. I mean, sometimes I didn't go to church, nothing happened. Sometimes I was in church and I'd goof off and do some stuff wrong. I mean, and one time I actually, thought, oh, God doesn't exist, and I didn't get, struck by lightning, and I was,
Amazing.
and I realized that, I just stuck with it because, it made me feel safe thinking, oh, this, guy in a red bodysuit isn't going to come and, kill me, and, yeah.
It got its hooks into you, and that's what it does, so.
Yeah, and see, well, anyway, I'll let you go with that, Doug. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
One of the things that's different, when we get different callers, especially when we get riled up, it's people who are asserting a position as not just this is what I believe, but this is what I believe is actually true, and I have good reason for it. There's a different discussion that takes place with those people, and then there are the people who are this is absolutely true, hellfire and brimstone, and there's a different type of discussion that takes place with those. And then there are people like Doug who have some belief, maybe they're not completely sure why, but they're not pushing it on anybody. They're not asserting that they're necessarily right and somebody else is wrong. And there's a different discussion that takes place with those people. And I'm in favor of all those discussions. I will ridicule ridiculous ideas, and I will not beat up on people who, are still questioning and aren't running around
working it out,
asserting absolute,
and not running around and in weird robes.
Yeah.
And
the other thing is that I
blowing people
highly
up.
doubt that Doug would ever, be advocating the teaching of Gaia hypothesis in public schools.
As an alternative theory.
But I might be wrong, Doug. If I pegged you wrong, you'd call back and correct me.
He's probably not that kind of guy.
So we got Leo in Austria or Australia?
Austria.
Austria.
But,
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you. No, hi, thanks for having me. I have called in before, although I was at a different location at the time. But hi to both of you.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to kind of discuss with you, get your opinion on this idea of moral absolutism. I know you've spoken on it before and kind of taken very much this stance of moral relativism and against this Ayn Rand thing. I'm not for Ayn Rand. I haven't read her book, but what I did want to discuss, if you've, I'm assuming you've seen Sam Harris's speech on TED.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that kind of moral absolutism that he's sort of discussing.
Sure.
And I don't know if you want me to elaborate for other viewers or not. Or
No, I can hit this pretty quick. If you go to YouTube and do a search for Sam Harris TED, there's a TED lecture, which is an exchange of ideas. He does a talk about what science has to say about morality. First of all, a correction, I'm not a moral relativist. I am far closer to some idea of absolute morals. I was giving a lecture on the superiority of secular morality. And
I was waiting for that to come out. I'm hoping the video is actually available so we can see it.
I've given it 3 different times now, and I don't think anybody's posted it on video. So I may do it. I think I'm probably end up doing it again for the ACA, in which case we'll get that video put up. With regard to what Sam said, we've had a lot of discussions about that. I think Sam's right, and I think he's wrong. And by that, what I mean is his assertion kind of that you can get from an is to an ought, from what is to what we ought to do, is false. He is, however, implicitly taking the extra step. In other words, to get from is to ought, you need one extra step, and that is a value. In Sam's talk, it seems to be implicit that our value with respect to what he's doing is a shared idea of improving the world. And as long as you have that value, you can say, this is the way the world is, this is our goal, our value of what we would like the world to be, therefore we can determine what we ought to do, and we can use the scientific method to do this. I think as long as we have that extra piece in there, Sam's exactly right. Dennis and I have talked about absolutes with respect to morals many times, and the shortest explanation I've been able to come up with is there's a limited number of actions that I could take in any given situation, and we can look at them and evaluate them with respect to my values. And some of those actions are going to obviously be better aligned with my values, and some are going to be worse aligned or not as well aligned with my values. And so because there is a finite set of actions I can take, there is some set of actions or a single action that represents the absolute best that I could take given those values. And that is the absolute that I would say exists and that I would strive for. And I think that you can take that same model and apply it to shared values.
I'm not sure I follow you, because are you trying to say that if you have a limited amount of actions you can take, mm-hmm. whatever actions you take will either be better or worse based on your values?
Correct.
Again, you're presuming that you have that. You're presuming that value. So it doesn't change the premise that from the is to the ought you have to have a value. You're agreeing that there is a value. You're just saying you're not necessarily agreeing that the value is shared by everyone.
No, I started with an example of mine, and I said that this same thing could be extended to groups where we have a shared value. That is,
okay.
Once we have this value as a goal or an ideal, then we can evaluate all actions or all potential actions with respect, the results of those actions with respect to our goal, and then there becomes some set which is the best set.
I think there's, I don't know whether you want to take this the kind of consequentialist route or the deontological route, in the sense that if you're looking at the goals first, then the values would be derived from our aims, whereas if we're looking at identifying our values, that comes slightly differently. And are we then asking, okay, are there any values that we all share? But Sam's point was, do we have to consider every single individual's point of view?
Right, and
there are certain values that I think are right for us to reject.
Yes,
but then the question becomes on what grounds do we think that some moral claims are better than other moral claims?
Right, and hopefully I'll get that lecture up, because one of the key aspects of the superiority of secular morality is that secular morality is entirely internally driven, and it's data and results driven, and it changes because the participants within the system change, and it changes based on data. Yeah. So if there is this group, it's like, I agree. Do I care one bit about what somebody in the KKK has to say about human rights? Absolutely not. Their opinion is disregarded. The problem comes, let's say that most people shared their opinion and I am now the outsider. These are the complex situations that we need to work on and resolve. At the end of the day, I am the ultimate decider of what I consider to be morally right and morally wrong, and people will either agree with me or they won't. However, my opinions, my values can change, and I will change mine based on evidence, reason, and argument. Where religions fail is that they either can't be changed, or what they end up doing is coercion, conversion,
or at best mental gymnastics to try and justify modern morality.
Well, it's a religion gives people bad reasons to be good.
I'm not. I maybe I should clarify this. I am quite anti-theist myself, so I don't necessarily want to justify the religion aspect of it. My perspective here more is to discuss the fact that most atheists of recently have been taking a relativist perspective to such an extreme that I've even discussed a few that even though they might see that religion might be bad, it has become so problematic for them to even criticize it because, well, how are they to know that that moral set is so bad or so wrong? That
Yeah, they've bought into a lie, in my opinion.
Yes.
They have bought into this myth that because we don't all necessarily agree that all opinions are therefore valid. And in the lecture, one of the examples that I use is a chess game, which actually I gave this lecture the day after Sam's TED lecture hit, so I had to go in and modify my examples. But chess has certain rules, and there's a goal. Now, all we need is some very simple things. For example, that not dying is good enough, and we can pretty much just flatly assert that anybody who doesn't think that not dying is preferable to dying we can disregard them. But if you ask a bunch of chess experts what's the best move in a given situation, you're going to find that you may get different answers. You may get quite a few of the same answers. And it may be the case that in this particular situation, there is no best answer. There are a number of equally likely to be good answers. And what religionists have done is convince secular people that if we can't find a best or agree on a best answer, then we might as well just forfeit the game. We can't possibly pick a good answer. And that's a lie. We can identify that sacrificing your queen with no gain is a bad move. And that these 5 moves, even though they may not be the absolute best, all lead to a win. Or all lead to better situations than the alternative moves that we've evaluated. So not having achieved the single absolute best answer does not mean that we're at a loss, that we can't do anything.
Yeah, but there's no answer at all.
And that was part of what I went through in that talk.
Yes, I agree with you. Although I will have to say I don't think that life is necessarily the pinnacle or the base function that we should agree on. I think it creates problems when it comes to debates such as euthanasia or
those are exceptions to those are exceptional situations.
Dignity or self-identification.
I tried to shorten that up because I don't want to give the whole talk here, but it's a set of basic general principles, and they all feed off of each other. That life is generally preferable to death, that pleasure is generally preferable to pain, that those types of things. And then when you determine that when they interact, when, for example, my life is consumed by so much pain, it may become the case in those instances that life is no longer preferable to death. And those are the difficult decisions that we leave up to individuals. This idea that the individual is sovereign is another one of those basic principles.
I think it runs even deeper than that, because if you a lot of the cases, trying to think what his name writes author, and his name just escaped my mind now, and who's got Alzheimer's now, Terry Pratchett.
Oh yes, yeah.
And his scenario is not a case of pain or can't tolerate life, but his point when he did a lecture on euthanasia, his idea was to say that it was this ability to self-determine, this ability to be able to take control and empower himself to choose when he wants to live and when he wants to die and under what conditions.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that ties into the idea of individual sovereignty that I was talking about.
Yes, and I think if I were to pick a principle that, and I think I do think in terms of morals we share probably quite a lot, but this is how I would define it in terms of respecting other individuals' right to self-determine, and that extends to the point where that right infringes on other people's rights to self-determine.
Yeah,
I would agree. Yeah.
There are a lot of those situations that we need to deal with. We need to assess. They are complex. They are difficult, and it would be nice if we could actually get busy working on them. Unfortunately, we're mired down in constant quibbling because this one particular group of people wants to assert that X is absolutely and always wrong.
Yeah.
And therefore you can have no discussion with them on the subject.
Yeah, so the Christian are moreover the theistic answer to these things. They always they don't want to have to think about this stuff very deeply.
Yeah.
They want the easy way of just having it all laid out for them to take care of it. And that's why the Ten Commandments and things like that are just so appealing. The whole idea that, all we have to do is put a list of rules on the wall in schools and in public buildings, and then everybody will be good. And this sort of simplistic, and I think it really speaks to a whole lot of fear of really trying to confront a lot of the complexities that are involved with making sometimes moral decisions aren't clear cut. They will always involve a choice of lesser of two evils. Sometimes a sacrifice will be involved that you might not want to make in order for your life to be in the best place it needs to be. People don't want to have to face these things, and they will hide behind the easiest out that they can hide behind. So again, that's just like the appeal of putting a face on the universe. So rather than studying the real science takes time and is hard, and you can spend your whole life at it. How much easier to just think of the universe as some sort of benign father or being ruled by some benign father than actually, same with morals. So
We got about 8 minutes.
Yeah.
We got about 8 minutes left. So if you can go ahead and wrap it up, I'll move on to somebody else real quick. But thanks.
Yeah, sure. What I was just thinking is if we were maybe strategically thinking that running ahead with trying to investigate it might be the best answer because it provides us with more evidence to back up the answers for those who are lagging behind. And maybe that way, at some point, it reaches this critical mass that could sway it to make the other points so ludicrous. Whereas now we're trying to investigate it, but we don't have the answers. And I think as we have more answers, maybe that becomes more of a viable attempt. Strategically speaking, maybe we shouldn't focus as much time arguing with them and run ahead with it and collect as much data as we can.
Yeah, and I think if the lecture actually gets posted, you'll like the way it ends. So
yeah, brilliant. But thanks very much for having me. Great show, guys.
Thanks very much. Okay.
Bye.
Try to talk to...
Let's go to John here in Austin.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, good. How you doing, John?
Yeah, let me turn you guys down.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I feel like my point of view is never expressed so many times in the world today. I like your show. I thought I'd call you today. I feel like I'm stuck in the middle of so many of these discussions, and this whole thing about this creationism versus evolution. I hate to bash the first 30 minutes of your show, but I'm so sick of that argument, man.
Me too. But
yeah, we are. But there's people who just keep wanting to rub our noses in it. What can you do?
As long as people are asserting that they have good reason for their claims when they really don't.
And it is a problem, remember, because there are people out there trying to influence school curriculums one way or the other, and it's leading to political nonsense. And it'd be nice if it all went away.
I have a lot of problems with. Recently, I heard some stuff that was they're trying to write history, and the conservatives. I'm not a conservative. But I have a lot of issues with those, with the people who want to mess with the school systems, and I agree with you guys on a lot politically. I agree with atheism in a lot of ways. I think our government should remain secular, and I think it was designed that way. And so there's a lot of things we agree on. I just, anytime you guys start talking about the Bible, you're guilty. To me, you're guilty of the same thing, and I think you're doing this on purpose. And I don't want to say anybody's being disingenuous here, but it seems like you purposefully like to keep the argument on a very literal basis. The Bible is only meant to be taken literally. Like the guy who called and said he couldn't be a Christian, he was a earth worshiper because Adam only had 2 sons, and 2 sons couldn't create grandchildren. It's a myth, man. It's a story about a story. It's not meant to be taken. It has value, and it's not meant to be taken as historical fact.
Okay, I understand that there are tons and tons and tons of Christians who hold that position. I don't tell anybody what their position is. I ask them what it is and address it. The problem is that the Christians who look at Genesis and say, "Oh, it's a myth, and I accept evolution." Okay.
Yeah, we're fine. Right.
I don't know by what basis they still believe.
Well, I'll tell you what we believe. We believe that there might be some value. We might be evolving into something higher than what we are right now, more purposeful.
That is an absurd notion.
Purposefulness.
That is
like the universe may
John?
have no purpose. Do
John?
you love anybody? Do you care about things? Do you care that
John?
the ocean is being destroyed by the
John?
John, are you going to let us answer any of these?
Right now? That is a purpose.
John?
There's lots
He
of
probably
purpose.
can't hear us.
See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
John, that's an absurd notion. The notion that we are evolving towards something. Evolution is a blind process with no goal.
I don't agree with that.
I'm sorry.
I feel that the purpose is, like I said, I was talking about the purposelessness. Why does it have to be this grand, great purpose of the universe? Why can't we find purpose amongst ourselves?
But see,
I think we do.
Yeah, but you're talking. That's what you're talking about there, John. John.
John, you're agreeing with us.
Yeah, what you're talking about there, that's not evolution you're talking about there. That's more of that's not biological evolution. That's not the mechanical process of evolution.
Right, yeah.
You're talking about more...
I am going beyond.
Yeah.
I get tired of only talking about biological evolution. I believe we're evolving spiritually.
But you're talking more about
Okay,
a cultural thing there.
But when you say you believe we're evolving spiritually, I have no clue what the hell that means.
Yeah.
That means that we're getting better. This was even addressed earlier in the show, that Christians think we're going to hell in a handbasket. I think the world's getting better. I think we're becoming more intelligent, more compassionate. We're starting to see connections. And I believe, this is another thing I believe that belief has power. And that's been demonstrated scientifically in the hard sciences. That's why they figure in the placebo effect whenever they do studies on drugs. Believing that something is going to be better makes things better in many cases.
It makes a perception of them better. It doesn't actually make them better. It doesn't make sugar pills actually work.
No, it does. People
No,
the symptoms go away sometimes.
It doesn't change the fact that there's still sugar pills that aren't actually doing anything. It changes the individual's perception. Beliefs.
People
No,
have
John,
people
no.
are relieved. The
John,
placebo effect is proven, man.
John, the placebo effect, I agree, is proven. It works. But
I
it's in a,
don't understand where we're disagreeing.
because, if you let me finish, the placebo effect is an effect. It works on your brain. It doesn't change the sugar pills into something that actually physically do something.
I didn't say they did. I didn't say that placebo
you did.
Well, you were
changed
kind of...
sugar pills.
Yeah.
But in any case, I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand. I guess anything. We've got like a minute left, and you've agreed with us on everything.
No, I don't agree. If you think someone taking a pill, and I don't care if it's a pill made out of bullshit, if it makes them feel better, it makes them feel better.
I agree. That's a tautology. If it makes them feel better, it makes them feel better. But it doesn't change what the pill is doing.
Yeah, it's not turning the
It doesn't
pill
turn
into
the
medicine.
pill into something that works. And I'm out of time. I'm out of time, but if you hang on, we'll get to you after the show. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back again next week, and I'm not sure if it's at the normal time or the later time. And we'll be at Threadgill's around 6 o'clock, 301 West Riverside Drive.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody,
Thanks
for
to all
tuning
the
in.
people who Facebooked me during the show. I kept feeling my phone buzzing all the time. So keep it going,
Yeah.
right? More Facebook. So